While we're starting here, waiting for other people to mosey on in. I'm Brent Hull. Thank you for coming to the window workshop. Look who it is. I wondered if we could go around real quick and just tell me why you're here. What do you want to know? What are you hoping to learn? If you're in the business, or what you're here for. Since you're on the front row,
Yeah, we're named Cameron Miller. We live in Utah. I follow you on the Build Show.
Okay, yeah.
We live in a 1924 bungalow. We like old things.
So you came from Utah?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
For this?
For this.
I'm so honored. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you.
Feel like I'd buy you lunch or something. My goodness, at least if you're coming from that far. Well, thank you. And so you're just interested in learning about old houses and windows and stuff? Yeah? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Gerald and Leslie Owen, we just purchased a home built in 1898, Queen Anne.
Okay.
All the windows don't work.
Okay. We'll talk about that.
Mark Swan from Dallas, and I have a 1934 bungalow that none of the windows work.
Okay. Most people, homeowners, have old houses that are looking for window work? Okay. Anybody travel farther than Utah? My goodness. Well, you're from New York, yeah, from Massachusetts, yeah. But she lives in Texas. Okay. Anything in particular about windows you're hoping to figure out today? Cole, why are you here? You just scamming me or something? What are you doing?
My brother Hunter, he bought a house, and he's gonna ask help from me probably.
1934 house over in Old Campo.
Sweet.
So
Okay.
all wood windows, but they're kind of in rough shape. So.
Awesome. Good. Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, no problem.
They went to my kids' school, so I can give them a hard time. Anything else?
School.
What's that?
And your wife's school. You went to Northeastern.
That's true. There you go.
I'm just an overly ambitious homeowner.
Okay. Like,
I mean, my windows work. I just need to figure out how to make them better.
okay. Well, good. Thank you for coming. Thank you, everybody, for coming. What we'll do today is, I'm Brent Hull. I've been doing this about 30 years. This is a 1921 National Biscuit Company distribution center. Austin, are we live? Okay. Hello to New York and everybody else. We opened this up virtually, and we had, maybe you didn't know this, you didn't have to travel. There was a virtual option. There have some people from Utah here. But we had a lot of people from Massachusetts, New York, all over, Chicago, Minnesota, that are joining us through this YouTube thing. So hello. Not sure how it's going to work, but that's why I'm wearing a mic. And so anyway, there are cameras. I have this company that we do historic millwork, right? And so these samples are examples of things we've built in houses and made samples for clients or done. We've got English and French and other things in there. My Build Show stuff is my studio that I shoot a bunch of videos out is outside. You're welcome to go look at that in that other room. And then we've got my Ukrainian carver who, about a 10-year relationship with him. He started doing some work for us from the Ukraine. I went and visited him. We finally got him here on an O1 visa. He's got 2 of his masterpieces hanging on the wall, and then he's carving some French paneling right now. So go out and check out that stuff. It's very interesting. So, okay, so getting started here. Really what we're going to talk today about is windows, right? What to do with windows, right? What to do with these historic windows in our houses. Are they energy efficient? Are they something that we can restore? Does it make sense to replace them? Why or why not? We're going to be talking about all that. These are some examples. Our company's been doing this for, like I said, 30 years. And so we've run into all kinds of different issues and problems. And we've actually kind of, I think, solved some of the old window problems with some other things that we're doing. But, you know, is a window like this with this kind of rot, you know, worth saving or not, is the kind of thing we're going to be talking about. So hopefully we'll be doing sustainability, you know, the architectural integrity, the style of the house, why windows are so important, longevity. How long should they last, right? What's a realistic expectation for how long they should last? And then the economic and viability, and we'll talk about energy efficiency. We'll start with, okay, just the distinctiveness, the longevity, talking about historic windows, their characteristics. We're going to talk about the glass, we're going to talk about the wood, all the components of historic windows and why they're so important for us. We'll start with glass. There's really, some of the people up in the Northeast will have old glass. We don't in Texas have as much, but we do have some old glass. The earliest type of glass available in America is what's called crown glass. Crown glass is, and this is kind of an example of it, you can see those swirls that are going around in there. The way those swirls are created and what happens there is they start with a little tube like this, a little glass ball, right? They'll cut the end of it and they'll begin to spin it, okay? In this furnace, they'll spin that deal, and this glass, sheet will grow and get really big, okay? About 3 feet square. You can see an example of it here. The important thing about this is, one, as far as dating it goes, you can look at historic glass, and we've got some examples of other types like cylinder glass, and you can see the striations in them. I don't know if you see those lines going through there. Those are straight lines, right? Those are long lines. These are circular lines because of the way they were spinning their glass. It's called crown glass. It's very expensive, okay? And you've heard the stories, you may have heard the stories about how glass was sometimes taxed, okay, in historic buildings in England. In Charleston, they taxed the glass. One of the reasons why houses were oriented to the side is because they couldn't count as much to the glass. They couldn't tax them for the glass that was facing the street. But you can see that if you're creating a sheet of glass this big, you only get a couple big pieces of glass out of it. So there's a lot of waste. The reason why those old English houses have those little diamond panes and little small panes is because that was an efficient way of making glass. It wasn't, they didn't make big sheets of glass back then. They didn't know how. And so this early type of crown glass is kind of what's most typical. Later, they get to this cylinder glass, and you'll note that this guy is up on a platform, but he's making a really long tube in there. And what they do, and you see these guys on this platform here, they would blow it and then they would actually throw it down, okay? So they would elongate that with centrifugal force, and that's why you get those long streaks on that because of how they were making that. They cut off the top, they cut it down the middle, it would lay out, and they would cut their sheets of glass. And so you could get bigger sheets of glass in this type of glass making. And then as things became industrialized, they would basically take a big vacuum down into a tube of molten glass and pull up, and blow into it while they're pulling up and create these really long tubes of glass. And this is into the 1930s. That you would see that kind of manufacturing. They'd lay these things down, they'd cut off the top, they cut them open, okay, and then they would grade them, okay. And so at this time you were trying to grade glass based on the fewer amounts of streaks. So this is a 1921 warehouse. If you look at the glass on this side, tons of waves in it, okay. This was probably like a C grade glass, right? Nicer houses and stuff would have an A grade glass, which were less streaks. And so sometimes if you go into a really nice house, and there's some in Fort Worth I've been in, you don't see any streaks in the glass at all, and it's because they afforded and bought better glass. This is from an 1890s catalog, millwork catalog. And so you'll notice that this is right for American glass. Most glasses, even into the turn of the century, or a lot of glass was still coming from France and England. And so this is an American glass list, but you see that single strength, double strength, but they got the AA, A, B, and C. Those were gradings of glass, right? They were grading the quality of the glass. And the other thing that's interesting is that all these were labeled by sizes, okay? Sizes of glass. And what that means is that this, like an historic house, this is, anybody know this house? It's in Virginia. I'm blanking. this glass would have not been a 9/9, okay? It would have been like a 12 by 16, 16 light or 12 light, right? And so they would actually determine the size of the windows by the size of the glass. So glass was really important is the point. Glass was really a defining point of how windows were made. And then as you get into later eras, the Victorian period is full of 2/2 or 1/1 windows, okay? And sometimes you'll see the 2/2 where the mutton bar is painted black, okay? They were trying to show that they had more glass, right? Because a bigger piece of glass was more expensive. It was a sign of taste and wealth to have this 1/1 or 2/2 big pieces of glass. And then the reason why in the ranch period you have the big sheets of glass is because we finally figured out how to do it, right? And so they came up with the float glass, okay, where glass would actually start in a long tube and lay out over molten tin and float. And so there was no striations in it. It was much more perfect, and they could create these huge sheets of glass. So our windows, the point being is the windows in our house are determined by the technology, right? You didn't have big sheets of plate glass in a Georgian house, right? They didn't know how. It was a big technological leap for them to be able to do that. Any questions about glass? I've had clients, and I've gone to their house and they said, well, we'll have to change the windows because the glass is failing. And I was like, what do you mean the glass is failing? Well, you see those lines that's starting to slump. Okay, no. That glass doesn't slump. Okay, leaded glass will slump, right? The lead will get soft and slump, but glass doesn't slump. So your windows aren't failing if your glass is wavy. Yeah?
Say you're fixing a pane, you got modern made glass, and you want wavy, is it replicated to be wavy, or is it actually made stripes?
So if you're trying to get a piece of wavy glass for something that's been broken in an old window, there's a couple of options. One, you can go to an architectural salvage yard and go buy an old piece of sash. They have them sitting in their yard, Old Home Supply over here, and cut it out of that. There's a company called Bendheim, and there's another one called Old World Glass. Is it Old World Glass? Those both companies are making wavy glass. And so you can get it new or you can get it salvaged. Salvage is going to be much less expensive. Any other questions about glass? Okay, so wood, okay? This is a pretty cool picture. This is the northwest, sorry. This is like probably California, Oregon, or Washington State. That's a fir tree. That's a big tree. And we're going to talk about wood, okay? If there's anything, the most important feature to get right in the windows, the reason your windows last a long time, the reason historic windows are so important to keep is because of the wood quality. The reason new windows rot out so fast is because of the wood quality. The fact is that today we no longer, or it's harder to get good wood, okay? We make our windows, our new windows are made of sapele, okay, which is a tropical hardwood, FSC certified. It's a great wood, rot resistant, very strong, stable, lasts forever, okay? If we don't put good wood in our windows, they fall apart, and that's why, you know, a lot of new production windows aren't very good. What you're looking at here is you're looking at a old growth forest and then harvesting some trees up in Maine, and a new growth forest, okay? And this was just the thing we got from, was it Detmore that had this? On Instagram, he had this picture, it's blown up all over. But he was redoing his house, and he found a stud in the wall that looked like that, and he went to the lumber yard and picked out a new stud, and it would look like this. And what you're looking at there is you're looking at the growth rings, the tight growth rings of the wood versus the new wood. And this is my example of it here, and we'll talk about this more, but you're seeing a piece of old growth longleaf pine versus a new stud, where this one has, you know, 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 growth rings per inch, and this one has more like 12 or 18. And so growth rings add stability. Growth rings and wood like this lasts a very long time, and we'll talk about it here in a second. So we basically ran out of old growth wood in about 1930, 1940, okay? So all wood after that is second growth or plantation grown, and it leads to all kinds of innovations, okay? Finger jointed wood is a post 1950, 1960 as they try to create long sticks of wood without knots in them, okay? Now, basically what happens is, if we go back to this picture here, the way new wood is grown is that they get pine like radiata pine, which is a western pine, and it grows to the height of 30 or 40 feet tall in about 20 years, 30 years, okay? So it grows very fast and quick, and you'll see all these right here, all these branches that are sticking out of there? Those are knots, okay? So anytime a branch goes into the trunk of a tree like that, you're creating knots. And these are very long, slender things with very few knots because of the way they grow. Now, in an old growth forest, right, anybody been to like Muir Woods or the Redwood Forest, right? It's very dark in there, right? It's kind of creepy dark, but it's because these trees are just, you can't even understand the scale of them, that they're just so big. Those trees, okay, that 100, 150 years old are growing very slowly, okay, because the amount of sunlight that they get determines their growth. Many might get its sun for an hour a day, right, before the sun passes their little hole that they're growing up in. So these trees will grow, and then when they break through the canopy, then they'll start producing a lot of branches, right? So you get these long trunks like this that are, knot free first. Second, because they've grown so slow, their growth rings are very tight together, okay? And that tight together creates stability, okay? The reason new wood warps and twists and does everything like that is because there's 1 or 2 growth rings per inch. There's just no stability there. So those tight growth rings are not only, good reason they're good qualities because of that stability in those tight growth rings. And then the third thing is that after they've grown that long a period of time, you'll see this thing called heartwood and sapwood, okay? Heart, not hard, heartwood and sapwood. And you can see it right there, right? There's your heartwood here, here's your sapwood there. And basically on the outside of these trees, okay, you have sapwood. And the amount of sapwood on a new growth versus old growth is you have very little heartwood and a great amount of heartwood in there. This heartwood is what lasts forever. There's minerals and nutrients and things in there that keep it stable. And if we just stuck this in the mud or got it wet and dry, this would probably rot off much faster than this, okay? Because the sapwood just isn't as good a quality wood. So there's a forest products lab thing. Let me see if there's any other ideas here. I'll do it now. Basically, Forest Products Lab, which is a government, forestry division, basically tested the heartwood of lumber and said, these are good woods, these are bad woods. And longleaf pine and these other ones are really good. So they have very resistant, moderately resistant, and then non-resistant. And all of the western pines are in the non-resistant category, okay? So all the big production window companies are using western pine. It rots out in Texas very fast. It may last longer out there in the West Coast because it's a natural habitat, but it just doesn't last long here. There are actually lumber harvesting charts, which is a geek like me loves, right? Because what you're able to see is that you look across the country. In 1870, New York, Pennsylvania, and Maine were the states where the majority of wood came from, right? And then by 1870, you start to see Michigan in there. 1900, Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota, right? So it's moving across the country like this, right? And then you get into, Oregon there, 1920, Washington, 1910. It's not till after 1900 that you begin to see major wood harvesting coming from the West Coast. By 1940, it's almost all on the West Coast, right? Now, what that means is that this country is moving this way and slowly, right? And then we start to come down here. Now, this is all white pine, Okay, this is eastern white pine. It's the predominant wood. All down here, okay, in the south is longleaf pine and cypress. Okay, so most of the windows that we're dealing with are longleaf pine and cypress. You guys might have fir windows in your house, right? And then out here is all the fir, redwood, woods like that are out here. Now, I'm saying it's a geek like me because we did a courthouse in Waxahachie, and they had doors that were white pine doors, right? And they had the windows, which are longleaf yellow pine. And what happened? Well, they ordered the doors from St. Louis down here, over here, and they got shipped in by railroad to Texas, right? But they made the windows locally, right? So it's an interesting way for me to date things, right? And look at windows and figure out when things are available. But if you have Western pine in your house, it's most likely going to rot out. And the reason why, one last thing, the reason why this area happens later is because they didn't have railroads to go into these forests. Up here, they could put them on rivers, especially the Missouri and the Mississippi River, and they'd float them downstream. Same thing up in the Northeast. In here is so flat, it wasn't until they had railroads could drive into the forest and pull out the logs that they were able to harvest that wood. During this time, 1900 to 1920, you had all the lumber company representative things advertising their lumbers and sweets catalogs and things like this. And here's that Forest Products Lab chart, right? Talking about these most resistant woods, okay, moderately resistant, and then slightly or non-resistant. You know, Doug firs in here. Redwood, this is second growth. This is old growth, okay? Eastern white pine, old growth, okay? New eastern white pine in, very good. Teak, second growth, right? So if we think about good woods we can still use today, right? We're looking at these woods here, okay? Longleaf pine, tidewater red cypress, fir, which is a West Coast wood, and then sapele, mahogany, Spanish cedar. So when we build any new wood, any new things right now, we're using sapele predominantly right now. Used to use a lot of Spanish cedar. And it's mainly because of cost, right? Sapele and Spanish cedar are $3 or $4 a board foot. So $3 to $4 a board foot, yeah. So and then also you have whereas old growth longleaf yellow pine might be $12 a board foot. So it's just cost prohibitive a little bit for us to do this and get these woods. You can, as homeowners, if you're wanting to mill your own thing, still get sapele, you can get quarter sawn fir, you can get these woods and get good quality still today. This idea of keeping it in its natural habitat means that cypress and longleaf pine are going to work better here in the south because we have these humid, hot conditions, right? In the west, where it's much drier, those western pines may perform out there. They don't perform in Texas. And so pulling a wood out of its natural habitat and expecting it to perform there is sometimes hard to do. Any questions about wood? Yeah.
Is like a 2x4 you get at Lowe's, is that longleaf pine if it says like southern pine?
No.
Well, what's that?
So it's a good question. So the wood that you get today, like it'll say SPF on it sometimes, that's spruce pine fir. Okay, those are West Coast woods that you're getting. If you are seeing pine, it's most likely loblolly pine, which is a yellow pine, southern yellow pine, but it's not longleaf pine. The problem with longleaf pine is that when they clear cut the forest, it's the way they used to do it, it didn't grow back like the other pines. And so there's very little longleaf yellow pine. It's the reason why it's $12 a board foot, because a lot of it is salvaged from rivers and streams where it's sunk to the bottom or it's taken out of old buildings. These posts right here in this 1921 building are all longleaf pine. So they would tear down a building like this and cut these beams up and sell it, right? I don't know if the quality, how many knots or things like that, but you know, these pieces that we're getting salvaging, there's not a knot in this piece of wood, right? And that's a very clear, wonderful piece of wood. And so, anyway, but yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
Good question. Where's the best place to find southern yellow pine? Because I've looked for it and it's kind of hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, it's a fight, and one of the reasons we do this is to teach people to fight for quality, right, and to teach them to push for. The basic problem is most people aren't asking for it, and so your lumber dealers don't want to deal with it. But we have to say, no, we need this, and they will go find it for you, okay? But it's just not something that's on the shelf easy to get. I remember I was trying to get cabinets. I was looking at our cabinets, and all our cabinets are inset. The doors are inset inside the frame. Do no any overlay. The reason we do that is because an overlay door or a European hinge is a post-1950 type of cabinet building. It's not as good. It's not as furniture quality. And getting cabinet guys to build them that way, right? The reason we started building cabinets is because we couldn't get people to do it that way. But then once they get used to it, they go, oh yeah, this is a better way. We're happy doing this thing. But that first push, getting them to do what they're not typically wanting to do, is really hard. And so, I want to encourage you guys to fight for these things that you're going to learn in here and know that you can get them. There are ways to do it. The other kind of reason why, if we're talking about this big picture of wood windows, is that there's a design consistency from 1850 up into the 1940s, where there's 100 years of window production and all the parts and pieces are standardized, okay? So this is a new historic window, but the bottom rail's 3 inches, the stiles are 2 inches, the rail's 2 inches, this is 1.5 inches. So all these parts and pieces are standardized, and here is an example from the window catalog just showing these different sizes and pieces. But if I go back to the 1890s, 1920s, I can find all these parts and pieces exactly designed and made like this, so that we work all over the country building windows, and the profile might change, meaning that profile on the inside, right, that shape of this profile here on the outside of the glass or on the inside of your room, that profile, that changes, but that's about it, okay? All the parts and pieces are pretty much standardized by that point. And here's just cutaway examples of all these parts and pieces, how the check rail works, and where all those things come from. This is our shop, right? We're building windows all the time, and we've got stacks of wood where we're making and we're running the profiles on there. But the reason I tell you that is that if you have a Marvin window or a Pella or any of these production windows, and we have clients that we're trying to replace a window that's 15 years old, and they go, well, we don't make that profile anymore, or we don't make that, we got to replace the whole window because they don't make that style or detail anymore. We're dealing with windows that are 150 years old, and oh yeah, just remake that part, fix that sash, replace the bottom rail if it's bad. But all these parts and pieces are very easy to make, very easy to reproduce. And so there's nothing about your windows that should be a design hurdle or a construction hurdle that should keep you from being able to make these. Okay, any question on the building, the construction, the parts and pieces? Wood, glass, design, right? Okay, so we're going to be talking about energy efficiency now, and that's probably why most of you are here. There's a bunch of good stuff here, and there's going to be a lot of questions, but just bear with me as we go through this thing. Basically, I'm going to advocate for a whole house solution, okay, and where true value lies as opposed to replacing windows, okay. There was up until 2012, up until about 9 years ago, window companies would advertise openly that you can save 50% on your energy bills if you replace your windows, okay? And the FTC actually came in and sued or fined 5 window companies for these false claims, okay? And one of the things that came out of this, an energy consultant, I've looked at a lot of window replacement data, and I've heard window salespeople say they can save 50%. If you replace your windows. In fact, the amount of energy saved by replacing all of the windows in a home, generating the order of 1 to 4% of the heating energy usage, okay? Basically, it's not true, and I'm going to show you why that's not true. Now, first thing you need to understand is your energy use, okay? Right? Only about 30% of it goes to space heating and cooling, okay? a lot of your things like appliances, computers, the lighting, water heating, right? Those are all things that aren't about heating and cooling your house, okay? So if you realize that only about 30% of your energy bill is spent heating and cooling, it helps you realize that, wait a minute, already I'm cutting into that advantage of replacing windows if I was going to do that. I'm on the Build Show and with Matt and Steve and these guys that are, Jake, who are huge passive house, energy efficient type of guys. And I see the battles that they're fighting on new houses today in order to make houses more efficient. For instance, lighting. You'll see a lot of people against can lights, okay, because they're so energy efficient. Basically, you've got a hot hole in your ceiling, right, that is just producing a lot of heat, especially pre-LED, right? And so people looked at it, and you go into a room, especially from the 50s, 60s, 70s, you have 10 holes in your ceiling, all producing heat. They're like, there's no way we can cool this house, right? So realize that there are things that we're learning about how houses perform that aren't just about windows, and there's a lot of inefficient things in houses today. That's energy use. Energy loss. If you look at, ducts is a place where you get a lot of energy loss. Fireplaces, plumbing penetrations, right? Floor walls and ceilings. Now, these guys will also put a blower door. Have you heard about these blower door tests? Okay, so those blower door tests are now, every house we build in Fort Worth has to pass a blower door test. And blower door test is basically they were putting over your front door a sheet with a big fan, and the fan measures resistance and pulling air through your house, right? If you put a blower door on a house from the 30s, let's say, you might get a return air thing, about 8 return airs per minute, okay? Meaning you're pulling that volume of air 8 times through your house, right? Passive houses pull about 1 or 0.6, okay? So they're much tighter, much more efficient, right? It doesn't require as much HVAC to heat and cool those spaces because they're so efficient. Now, I put a blower door on a new house that we had done, and we had done foam insulation, good windows, and we still blew a 5, right? Where code is around 3, it used to be 7, now it's around 3, depending on the city. So we still had to go find places where and sometimes these holes are like this big, right? And so it's not very much that causes you to fail a blower door test. I tell you all that because as we look at our whole houses, and especially windows and window replacement, realize that your older house is full of holes, okay? It is very inefficient. And so to expect to try to solve one thing with the windows and not have chimneys and fireplaces, and you probably don't have insulation in your house, or if you do, it may not be everywhere. There's just tons of holes and problems. But most of the energy loss in these houses that are tested, only 10% is on windows, 10 to 20% if you include doors, right? 10% on windows. Now, realize that 30% of your energy use is spent on space and heat cooling, and only energy loss, only about 10% is through your windows. Now, you might stand next to your windows and you go, well, you haven't been to my house, right? Because you can feel the drafty and stuff like that. I'm just telling you, you just don't realize how trying to solve this window thing and thinking it's going to solve all these energy issues, it just doesn't work. In fact, the research is that it's between 40 and 100 years, okay, if you replace all the windows in your house, to get a payback, okay? Now, the problem is that those windows only meant to last about 20 or 30 years, okay? If you go to the big production websites and look at their warranty, it's like 10 years, right? And so it doesn't work, right? The math doesn't work to expect you to replace the windows and get a payback. It just doesn't happen. Now, this is my house, my first house in Fort Worth, okay? It's a 1929 little bungalow, okay? I'm going to show you how this math works. Is there any questions while I'm doing that? Yeah.
If the window is painted shut,
Yeah.
That can be better for,
Ironically, yes. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I figured,
Yeah.
yeah, maybe we don't need to do anything.
You can leave now. So if you, so this house was basically, okay, my first house was basically 40 by 40, it's 1,600 square feet, okay? If we, okay, and I kind of recreated this, I did this weekend, we're trying to figure out, there was a bathroom there, and the kitchen was right there, and there were some closets there, and a dining room, there's a fireplace there. So I started adding up the windows and started thinking about numbers of windows and how it was laid out. But if this is 40 and this is 40, right? So it's we're going to cheat and say it's a square. And then I started laying out the windows in the house, and I started, well, that's a small one, that's a small one. There's two there. There's one in the kitchen, one on that back porch, one in the bathroom. There's two windows here, two windows here. There was a door there. Okay, so I ended up with about I think 25 windows. Okay, so I'm thinking that my total house is 1,600 square feet, right? And then I started doing the math. Okay, so pardon me, so I don't stand weird. If you figure the floor plan, okay, the floor is 1,600 square feet. Okay. That means the ceiling is the same way, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm going to calculate the total outside square footage of my house, this box, right? So I've got 1,600 square foot on the floor, 1,600 square foot on the ceiling. I've got a 40-foot wall all the way around and a 9-foot ceiling, okay? So I've got 360 feet. So each wall is 360 feet times 4. Anybody with a calculator? 1,200. How much? 4,600. And then 3,246, that'd be 70. Oh, that's everything? Thank you, sorry. So that's everything. That's total square footage. Then I did, okay, what are my windows? Okay, the windows are basically 3 by 5, okay, in a bungalow. That's 15 square feet, right? And then if you go 15 square feet times 25. 375. How much?
375.
So the windows are 375. And then if I figure the doors, even though that's not really part of it, I'm just going to do it. Doors, I have 4 doors by 21, that's 84. And then those two together are 459. Which is basically just under 10%, okay? Do you see that? 459, if I added a 0, it'd be 45.90. So it's just under 10%. Now, so the outside walls of this house, I've got only 10% in the windows. It's probably even less if I don't include the doors, right? Now, how do I expect, understanding the energy use, understanding how much loss in windows and doors, understanding that my surface area is less than 10% of windows on these outside walls, how can I expect to save 50% of my energy bills if it just got so little area there? Now, the other thing is, and I'm not even done, the other thing is that this is a new window. I had a video on the build show. I broke it up and showed people. But basically, we've got an insulated glass unit, okay? Now, this historic window, this new historic window that we did here, has single pane glass, okay? That has an R value of 1, okay? This insulated glass has an R value of, guess what? 2. Okay, so we've doubled it, right? So it's 2. Now, the wall on the outside of our house, if it has insulation in it, let's just say it has fiberglass insulation, it has an R value of what? What? 13? Yeah, 15, maybe good. If you do foam, maybe you can get up to the 20s, right? And so in a 2x4 wall. And so even though technically you've doubled the insulation value, the R value of your window, you're still a 2, okay, on a 14 or 15 R value house. And so again, trying to make that pay, okay, is just really hard to do, okay? Not only the fact that oftentimes, or all the time, is that what they have to do to make these windows to hide this insulated glass, right? And that's what they're doing with these mutton bars. See, this is a little metal spacer inside, okay? And then they tape the wood onto the face of the glass, okay? And so it's taped on both sides. And what happens is they have to show you what's happening there. So this is a piece of insulated glass, and here's a mutton, right? A window mutton, 3/4 inch window mutton. See this little spacing here? I can't. Let me do it this way. See what happens there? I can't hide that black spacer. Do you see that? Right? Because on my historic mutton bar, I only have about 1/4 inch right in here. And this is between 3/8 and 1/2 inch, right? And so if I put in insulated glass on that window, you'd see this black line all the way around here, okay? And so what's happening is they are squishing their profiles, okay? They're flattening out their profiles going because they don't have much room here, and you lose the depth and charm of these historic windows, that shadow line, because they're trying to hide that insulated glass. So that goes to the architectural integrity piece, right? That goes to the piece of it that, you know, the windows are the eyes of the historic house, right? They are the things that we love so much. And if you have a Victorian house with a 1/1, 2/2, and you put a 6-light window in there, it will mess it up, okay? It will mess up what that looks like and what that feels like. So I feel like, especially in the South, glass is really meant for is a heat loss holder, right? It's really meant there to keep from heat loss. We don't have a heat loss problem in the South, right? We have a heat gain problem, okay? So again, insulated glass doesn't make much sense in the South because that's not our problem, that's not our challenge. Our challenge is heat gain. So what we do is we'll put films on our glass, right, which actually can stop, you can get different shades of it, 80% or 90% of the heat gain that's coming through your window, and now you can keep these windows, put a film on it, and really solve a lot of problems. The other thing I do, if it was this house and it was mine and the windows were rattly and leaky, the very first thing I would do is I would put insulation in, right? So if I have 25 windows and I'm trying to replace them with a good wood window from a production company, it could be $40,000 or $50,000, right? If you're trying to insulate this house and you're trying to blow it in the walls and the ceiling, you might spend 4 to 8, okay? So, and that payback really can happen in 1 or 2 years, right? Whereas, the window thing, it won't pay back, right?
So is that why when you go down the street, you see some houses that the glass looks green? Is that what they've done, is put a film over the?
No, the film, like we've done films on courthouses that we've done, historic buildings, it makes it a little bit darker, okay? We've got film on the outside of these windows. If you want to go look at this window, because we've got such a strong western face on our building, we've filmed all those glass pieces. And if you look at those glass and walk around the corner and look at our north face glass, which aren't filmed, you probably can't tell a difference. They might be a tinge darker. Now, realize that window films have, in the last 10 to 15 years changed a lot. Used to be in the 60s or 70s, you almost see the mirrored film that you would see on the historic buildings. Films have gotten a lot better. Museums have actually asked for, because think of the Talendo Museum, the Modern Museum over here in Fort Worth, all that glass, they have to have a film on that or just eat up all that artwork. So the films have really become sophisticated, and they shouldn't look green. They might look a little bit darker, but that'd be it.
It's just a strange color.
Yeah. Tempered glass can sometimes look green. Any other questions about that whole thing? Do you have questions?
Your mic's not on, you're fine.
Okay. So we built this historic thing. Historically, what did they do, right? Historically, they had storm sash, okay? Now, for our new historic window, what? What?
I was just commenting, we have a house that's older than God, and, I noticed you put chain on the side instead of that cloth
Rope? Yeah.
rope.
Yeah, we do both. Yeah, it's a, typically, commercial buildings and very fine residences will have chain, and then others will have rope. We were showing off. Most of the time, a small house around here would have cloth, and we'll talk about that when we start restoring windows. But essentially what happened is you have, this is our new historic window, and we have a storm sash, right? And we have a screen. And both of these will fit right in here. They're the same size. This would fit in here like this. You would get hooked on the inside. This is what you'd have in the summer, right? And then in the winter, you'd pull off and you'd put your storm sash in, right? And that's what these are. This is from a 1912 catalog, right? So in the Northeast, in areas where they had really cold winters and things like that, you would have even divided light storm sash, other things that you'd put over top your windows and create a more energy efficient window. And they do work.
I have a question about that, because that's what I care the most about.
Okay.
We have the triple track, and they're hideous, and I hate them.
The triple
How-
track.
Yeah, the storm windows.
Okay.
How insane would it be to get rid of the triple track and try to do something like that?
It's not insane at all. Okay. Here's the irony about storm sash. If your house has storm sash, it's protected your windows wonderfully. Okay. Now, they oftentimes don't work. They're ugly, right? And so, if it was my house, I would absolutely do something like this. And so, I mean, that's what you do.
Right, that's what we want to do.
Yeah, and so it's real. I guess I'm saying that if I was going to argue from the other side,
Yeah.
these will not protect your windows as well as that other, the seal that you have on it now.
Yeah.
But I think the integrity and the beauty of it will be,
Because one
10
of ours
times harder.
broke, one of the triple track, and so it's entirely gone from the window, and every time I walk by our house from the side, I'm like, that window's beautiful, and the other ones are ugly.
Yeah, and you know why?
And that's why.
Part of the reason why is that when they put that screen, that glass shield, it
Yeah.
creates, you lose all the depth of
Right.
the historic window. Because when I put brick on this, and you end up having 5 or 6 inches of depth there versus this straight field, it just looks more beautiful.
Yeah.
And those shadow lines really matter. And so I would fight for those.
I didn't realize how much they mattered until we lost one of them, and how much more beautiful that window is than the others.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, class dismissed, right? Yes, sir.
So we have screens that actually hang on the outside.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're gonna need to restore some of those. right?
Yep.
Not all.
Yeah, so we found this way of hanging the screens and sash in a historic Miller catalog. We did that. Most of the ones we're doing have the clips here
Yeah.
that you hang over top of it. Both are historic, both have good precedent, and so, yeah, it's probably easier to hang and unhang those versus these, whereas these require one person to be inside, and you can actually take those other ones off, lift them off from the outside, so, yeah, both are good. Any other questions? And then, as we do historic windows, if you've got a commercial building, for instance, we'll actually go through and actually survey a window, where we'll go through and actually grade each part. You can do this on your own as a homeowner, just go around and kind of figure out what kind of shape your windows are in. And you don't have to build a graph like this. But typically, I would think most of your windows just need to be opened again. So we've talked about this sustainability and historic integrity. Any questions about all this? Because the first hour, we're talking about why you don't. And then the second, we're going to actually break out these windows and talk about restoring them. So any questions about why, or if I should, or I think I'm still going to, or any of that? Okay. We're going to talk about the process next, and what we'll do is we'll take a 10-minute break. We're going to set up a table in here, and then we'll all stand around and restore some windows. Okay? Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do is there is a novelty bias, an innovation bias, whatever you want to call it, that new is always better than old. But I think what happens is we look at a window like this, which is probably 100 years old, and we're like, ugh, God, I mean, this, surely you can't restore this. Surely it can't be working again. And the truth is that because of the wood quality, because of the character of the glass, because of how it was made, this is absolutely something that can be working again and better, in my opinion, more long lasting than anything else. We are in the process of begin testing next month a new window, which we're going to call our 100-year window. Now, we're calling it that because we work on enough historic buildings that have that are 100 years old, that we're taking out the window, reglazing it, weather stripping it, getting it going again, and it'll last another 100 years. So we believe that we can build a 100-year window. That is based on our experience in restoring these. Now, we're on the, the other thing is I was just talking to this other guy about this. If you feel the difference in these two sash, okay? One, the bottom one's weather stripped, okay? And it's much tighter and harder to move, okay? And the other one is not weather stripped. You kind of feel that rattly stuff, and if your windows rattle, right, sometimes, oftentimes it's just a matter of weather stripping, that your windows can get completely tight, and when they're down and closed, they're closed and they're as efficient. We did a courthouse about 15 years ago, where we actually had to get our historic window tested. And so we took it to a lab, they tested it, and with weather strip and everything else, it was a grade 40 window, which is what, a new Marvin window, a new Pella window is as well. So we feel like, we can absolutely, if you build it new and build it right, or restore it right, you can have a very efficient window. And because you've got great wood, a very long-lasting window. Now, the tools that you will need are not very many. You can see that they're mostly just hand tools here. I've got one power tool in case, I always liked working, building stuff because you could buy tools. So if you want an excuse to buy a tool, this is a good one. It's a multi-tool. But it's for like cutting that paint and stuff. I can cut that loose pretty quick. If you want to do it the hand way, then you just need a few simple tools. Now, what are those tools? So a 5-way, okay, this is a painter's tool where you can clean a roller and do different stuff, but this is a very handy tool for what we're doing as far as getting in here and cutting out paint. This is actually going to be, this paint is really hard in here, and the other way to do that is just break it like that, and you'll see that line right there just got broken, right? And now that window's already loose, okay? So if your windows are just painted shut, literally taking a 5-way and going in here, and you'll see that this on this side, right? You see that line broke, right? Almost all the way up. I can get this window, operable pretty fast. I could go to someone's house, cut this open, get this sash operable again in about 4 minutes, okay? Popping the paint lines, cutting the one on the inside, popping it on the outside, and just, really pushing it hard and getting it moving again. The thing I was saying here is if I waxed that bottom window, okay, that thing would just slide like butter, okay? So if you just want to get your windows working again, you're cutting the paint loose, right? It might take a crowbar like this to come in here and pop it loose, but I can get this thing working again pretty quick and get it moving up and down. And my steps would be breaking that paint loose, breaking this seal at the bottom, lifting it up, and I would literally go as fast as I could, lift this thing up and down, and all I'm doing is knocking paint off, knocking chips off. I would wax it and then I would close it. And literally be faster than other people, but you know, in a weekend you can get all your windows working again if that's all you're trying to do. Okay. If you have things that are broken like this, then we can get into more of that. Now, just to understand the parts and pieces, okay, on this window, and it'll vary for those people in other parts of the country. In Texas, the way our windows are built is they're typically made with this type of pulley, okay? And it's a very simple system, right? Is that you have a weight and pulley in the wall that's moving up and down, right? And so it's a counterbalance system. Your pulley's up at the top, right? Literally, when we're making new sash, we will weigh the sash once the glass is in it, and if it weighs 10 pounds, we got 2 5-pound weights on either side, okay? Now, if you go to the lumber yards, there's a number written there. We've actually cut this weight because we need less weight, but they would actually have their weights on there. So you can get antique weights and get 5, 10, 8-pound weights because they're pretty standardized. And so getting new weights is not a big deal. If your ropes have been cut, okay, most likely, and you see the way this is built, this is our window pocket, right? You got a pocket in here, a weight pocket's right here. That weight is just dropped down to the bottom of that pocket. Okay, it didn't disappear, didn't go into the cellar, didn't go anywhere. It's typically still right here with the window. So if I take off this, I'm on the outside, but if I took off that interior casing, that weight is sitting right there, probably with the still tied to a rope, and the thing's been cut. Okay, so if you've lost your weights or you don't know where they are, they're most likely still in the walls. So don't fret too much. Don't feel like you got to get weights because they're most likely still with your window. What was the other thing I was going to say?
So you get the chain instead of the rope.
Well, you have to order the chain, and basically what happens is, hey Alice, where are those pulleys? There, you will know whether your windows originally had weight, rope, or chain by looking at the pulley. Okay. These pulleys have a square bottom. Okay. So the bottom of this pulley, right where that is, it's square. Okay. These ones are round. Okay. And so if you have a round bottom to your pulley, then you most likely had rope. And I would say, you know, 85% of windows that we've ever worked on have rope over chain. Okay, our clients, when we're building a new window, they want chain. They think it's prettier and stuff like that, and we get them chain. So it's a little bit more expensive, but if you're doing a restoration project, you'll typically be going back with rope, not chain.
Where do you buy the rope?
We got ours at Ace Hardware. It's like $2.
Yeah. Most of these, the great thing is that most of these, yeah, thanks. So you can see, like this has a square bottom. You see that? It has a square, and this one has a round, right? And so you'll know by looking at your pulley, that's good, Chris, what you're supposed to be getting. And these things come in all different shapes and sizes, right? Most times in commercial things, you're seeing a cast brass or a cast steel thing like this. As you get into cheaper windows, they end up, that's iron. These are just stamped steel, right? And that's pretty typical in Texas, what we're seeing. So they come in all different shapes and sizes. And these are, this is a particular Texas thing, but these aren't even screwed in. See how this, some of these sash pulleys that you have will actually have screws that can screw into your jamb. These are just compression fit, okay? That one is. And this one has a hole in it, and they've actually got a nail, okay, just a 16-penny nail that they put through there, and that's what holds that pulley in there. So all different shapes and sizes. None of them are wrong. None of them are better than necessarily others. Any other questions?
Painted too. Really like to paint our house.
Yeah, no, we were just talking about that. So typically what happens is that at some point they've been painted shut. and then they don't know what to do with the rope, and so they either paint it, or sometimes they'll just cut it because they don't want to see the rope there. They're never going to use the windows, and if you have painted sash cord, I would probably replace it because it's really going to get it hard to get it moving again. And like, hey Alice, throw me that rope. All of these things can be got at an Ace Hardware or Lowe's or Home Depot. None of these tools are especially difficult to get. You don't want to get, this is it will say sash cord or sash rope at a hardware store. You don't want nylon, okay? You can't use other things because they're actually stretchy, okay? So you actually want this kind of knotted, kind of special sash cord. Yeah, so I would replace them, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so first thing you do is you get it loose with your 5-way. You're just breaking it loose. Now, I'm going to do the top sash here. You know what I'm going to do?
Do people need to get close around? Because I know some people can't see.
No, actually, Hunter and Cole, will you bring that window over to me? Yeah.
Feel free to move on up here if you can't see.
Just lean it right against here.
Which way, this one?
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks, guys. So this is the outside of your window. This is your inside. Okay. Now most of you can do all this work from the inside. Okay. And I'm going to show you how to take your sash out of your window. Okay. So you've got an upper and lower sash, right? And we're only going to take off one side. Now, the first tool I would use is just a utility knife, which has no blade. You'll want a blade in yours. And so what you're going to do is you're going to just cut along this line. You can take get this in here. Okay, so you can, like, I would just take my utility knife and I'm just going to cut that line, okay? Okay, and I'm going to do it on both sides. And I'm going to do it down here. And all I'm doing is it's just been painted shut. Hopefully it hadn't been caulked shut. It's just been painted. And typically what happens with that paint is sometimes they don't even mean to paint it shut, but the paint gets sticky and if the painter isn't careful, it'll just get stuck and they're like, oh no, it doesn't work anymore. But it's just a matter of getting it undone. I'm actually going to come back in with my 5-way and a hammer, and I'm just going to pop those lines just to make sure and I'm just kind of wiggling it around, right? Just trying to make sure I got it loose. The same thing on this other side. Now, the other thing you're going to want to do is, now, from just one side, you don't have to take the trim off all the way around. You only have to do it from one side. And I'll do it this side just so most people can see. But you're going to go in here and take this stop out. And what happens is, and I'm just kind of just wiggling it very carefully because I don't want to break it. I'll probably break it now that I said that. The other thing is if you get a pry bar, okay, if you get them like this, get a very thin one. That's about as thick as you want to get. This one is a very thin one, okay, because it allows me to get into some of those tight spaces without breaking anything. And so I'm just carefully taking this thing off. Now, I want to get a little bit more. I'll do it a little bit more. okay? I didn't break it. Yeah, he's right. The other thing is that on these nails, okay, I end up either clipping or pulling the nails off. Now I've got two types of clips here, two types of wire snips. This is a very handy tool. If you have nails like this sitting on your deal, to be able to pull them out is a big deal. Sometimes you'll have a hammer that you need to do. You can do sometimes, but sometimes with just these little spikes and stuff, this is a very handy tool. One of the first tricks is just a wire snip. It's just a snub nose wire snip, and there's a couple different types. The other thing is because this has been painted over, it's one of the first tricks I learned when I was doing this stuff is always pull the nails through the back, right? Don't try to pull them through, don't try to hammer them back through the face because you'll blow up the face of this thing. So again, I'm going to take my snips. I'm just going to pull these nails through the back. And if it won't pull through, then I'll just snip it off. Yeah, exactly. That actually had a head on it. Typically, they don't have a head on. Because you will go ahead and put this piece back on, but even if you don't have a nail gun and you're just going to hand hammer nails back in, you can even just straighten these back out and put them right back in. But that saves your face of the wood from getting torn up by doing that, by pulling them back. Now, they've got this bottom piece on here. Yeah, basically there's your sill that's still on. They cut it off, okay? There's an interior stool on this one. So, you see that? So this is the inside of this sash. And this is they got a piece of Formica on the original stool, but right, and they've lost their stop. There's a piece of plywood here holding these stops in here, so those aren't original. But here's your original interior stool, okay? And that's what when they came along and cut this off, they left the lip of this thing, but they kept this here. So I'm going to take that off because. And again, I'm just going to pry that off. Now, actually, I'm going to leave it on. Change my mind. Because let's just say for your sake, you don't have to take any other trim off. And all I'm going to do now is just lift this window up. I see it's painted from the outside, so you're going to have to go around to the outside of your window, and you're going to have to pop it loose. Okay, so I cut the line on the inside. I'm going to pop it loose on the outside. Same thing. That one's really. I'm glad it's that hard because I don't want you to think that, oh, I'm doing something wrong if it's not. Sometimes you just got to bang on the thing. I'm going to take this power tool. If you wanted to buy a power tool, it's kind of a multi-tool. Right? So I do it here too. But we basically, all we're doing is cutting that paint line, that caulk and paint line, right? I need to turn off my mic?
Left side. Oh, dangling.
So again, I'm just kind of breaking this thing loose. Okay. And that multi-tool really was faster, but I'm going to and I'm going to pry there, and you can see it kind of breaking that paint line under there. A lot of caulk on this. And then I got to cut this other side. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Now sometimes I do these demonstrations and it looks so easy because it just kind of falls apart. I fear that some people go home and go, God, it looks so much easier when he did it. So I'm glad this is hard. Okay, so now I've broken that apart. I'm going to take a pry bar from the inside and I'm going to start lifting it up. Yeah, let's turn it around again. Let me just come down here. Now, if I got really fast or I got too quick, I could break the glass, which would be a bad thing. So I'm just trying to be careful with this thing. And you see, thank you, I got it now.
Just had back surgery 2 weeks ago. So he's really not feeling it.
So now that I've got it kind of broken on both sides, right? I'm just kind of lifting it up. And all this is doing is breaking the paint seal. So, thanks. So, right, it's broken loose. Now, I got above my sill, and all I'm going to do is just tip this out. Nope. Okay, and I got one side out, I can just tip the other side out and it comes out. Okay, so I've made it look easier. But there was a lot of paint on that, right? There's a lot of caulk on there. So now I've got to get the upper sash out. And basically, the way these are built is they're built with what's called a parting stop. And the parting stop is what separates the two sash. So you can kind of see in here or in there that you've got two tracks where these sash are moving up and down in. Now you got to special order these, but this is a vice grip. It's a handy tool for grabbing a hold of this and just working it around, because there's probably 2 nails in this board, in this piece. They're compression fit. You just slide in. But what happens is, if I try to get it with the 5-way, I can sometimes break it. But you can dig in there and I got to break it loose at the bottom because I know they've got all that caulk in there. All this tons of caulk. I'm just getting down to the bottom. I'm going to pry this thing out. And now I've got it loose right there. Okay, so this little piece of wood is like 3/4 deep by 1/2 inch wide. And if you break it, it's easy to make a new one and fit it back in there. But you can see that I've broken it loose here, and it's kind of stuck there at the bottom. I'm going to very carefully just pry until I can get it out, right? And then there's a lip here. I got to make sure I get it around that lip. So I'm going to bend it. And I'm going to slowly pull this out.
I'm gonna hold this just in case.
Okay, so now I've got my parting strip out, right? And I've pulled out 2 moldings now. I've got this piece of trim, parting stop, And now this top one, when I break it loose, will also come out. You don't have to take any of your interior trim off, right? I got all my trim around here. I got my stool sitting here. Now we can take these sash out and, you know, put it up on a table and work on it. Now, this is what your rope looks like inside the sash, okay? There is they're on both sides. There's basically a hole down in here and where your sash cord goes. You see that? See that hole? And so basically, when I tie new string or new knot, I'm actually going to tie a knot in this thing right here, sling it through, but this is what goes into that hole. You'll also notice as I pull this out, there's typically a nail in here. Now I'm grabbing this loosely just so I can pull it, but I'm not trying to cut through the cord. I don't want to get my leverage on here so I can get this thing out of here. See, it broke on me. But there's a nail in there holding that sash cord in there. There's that nail holding that sash cord in there, and this should just come out, unless there's a second nail. So in order to, let's be a second nail. In order to get these out, it looks easier on TV. I'm just digging a rope out of a hole right now.
The other side?
Well, oh yeah, there's a second nail in there. Where's my other snips? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, they nailed that in. But I'm going to do that on both sides. I'm going to pull these ropes out. And then I got to figure out what kind of shapes this in. As I was pulling it up, I was noticing it was a little bit soft around the corners. So I'm just going to get my 5-way and I'm just going to start peeling paint, okay? Now, the thing is that glass can be kind of expensive. So I don't want to break this glass, especially a big sheet like this. But see how that paint's coming off like this? I know that there's been water intrusion on this thing. And it may be simply because of the way it was sitting outside when we picked it up from the salvage yard. But all I'm doing is I'm trying to clean off all the paint and caulk that's been just slobbered all over this thing. But essentially, I'm just going to try to assess the quality of this sash, try to figure out what's going on here. A lot of caulk, that's what all this is. And so in kind of cleaning it up, I'm just kind of checking to see, and I don't see any, even though it's a little bit soft and I can feel that it's wet, I would not replace or do anything with this except clean it up. There's a lot of caulk, but it's mostly just bad paint jobs over the years. Now the other thing we're going to do, certainly as part of this, is start cleaning up the glazing, because I can see right here, okay, where that glass goes up in there, they've caulked that. Okay, you can still see the caulk, and I'm going to need to clean that out. That's not very good. Caulk actually holds water sometimes, so we don't want to do that. But the next thing would then be to clean out the glazing. Okay, so I'm going in here with my 5-way, and I'm just kind of picking along here, and I can feel that glazing is really soft, like a little still wet. And so I'm just going to be carefully more because I don't want to break the glass than anything else. But and it's a combination of just carefully pushing my knife on here and seeing what comes loose, right? So I'm just on the face of that glass, just kind of going along there. So I'm just dragging that along there. I'm not pushing very hard. Again, I don't want to break the glass, but I'm just pushing along there into a lot of soft spots. And this is the second place that you can, if your windows are in decent shape, that you could take a shortcut and not completely restore these. Essentially what we're doing when we fix windows is we're pulling the sash out of a building and we're taking them and we're getting them dipped and stripped. Okay, so we are taking these down to bare wood. When we do that, it takes all of the glazing out of there. We do that because of environmental stuff, in case a building's been hot. There's sometimes hot asbestos and stuff like that, or hot paint. And so we will clean it up. In a situation where, like this, I'm a homeowner and I've got a few places where there is, or a piece of broken glass, or a few places where there's bad glazing, I can just go to the hard glazing, leave it in there, okay, and then just reglaze this window, okay? Or the amount of work and the amount of labor hours, if depending on the weekend, depending on how you're doing it, if you have someone in the area who can strip them for you, and you can take them to a place and they can strip them and clean them, and then it saves you hours of work. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 minutes now, just getting one sash out, just trying to do this. The deal with window restorations, it's very labor intensive. And so it is something that in order to get this right and to get this clean, I've got to just sit here and pick at this thing. And because of the way they've painted this, and slowly get this out. Now, I'm not going to do this one because it's going to take too long. But I will do one of these small ones and show you how to cut glass too, because that's the other piece of this you need to know how to do, is if you are trying to replace the sash, getting it clean and ready. So, because this window on the outside had already lost a blind stop, I'm going to take this window out from the outside, this sash. Say that. And I'm going to fix that sash right there. You guys can ask me questions while I'm doing this.
Steam box versus...
Yeah, he's asked about steam box versus a dip and strip. So a steam box is basically a hot box with steam in it that will actually lift the paint and lift everything off of your window, okay? There's a company that makes a steam box. I think they're about $10,000 or $12,000. They're pretty expensive. They usually have, they're pretty big, and they usually have trays, at least for sash, that you can slide them in there and you leave them for a few hours and then come back and they clean up pretty easily. It's a speed and production thing for us. We're typically not doing steam boxes because they're too slow and we can't put enough sash in there. So that's kind of the reason why we do that. So what's happened here is there's a blind stop, okay? So we're on the outside of the window. This is what's called a blind stop. This is the piece of wood that keeps this in a track. This is the outside piece of the track. And I'm going to lift this piece off to get to this sash. Whoop. So that's just a blind stop, and that would be the same way as you handle that exterior trim. Typically, you're not taking your windows out from the outside, but just for sake of speed, I'm going to get this loose. Okay, I'm going to flip it over. Yeah.
All of my windows have had the glazing removed, and they need the silicone caulk between the sash and the glass. Is there a way to remove the window glass without breaking the glass?
Well, they said they're all siliconed in. Yeah. No. Silicone is a product that actually sticks to glass very tightly, and it's very difficult to get it removed. I would start with a putty knife and try to cut it with a putty knife, or cut it with that utility knife I was using. But and I'm just breaking paint loose on the inside here so I can get this sash out.
I have seen a putty knife like that that's actually 90 degrees. It has a sharp corner.
Yeah, it has a sharp corner, has the serrated edge.
It's just a sharpened edge on a 90 degrees, so it's for scraping caulk out.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, the problem is when silicone gets hard like that, it's just really hard to get out of there. And because it's designed to and sticks to glass so well, that's why I was kind of saying that you're really kind of screwed in that situation, because silicone's so hard. All right, so what I'm doing is, there's a piece of weather stripping in here, okay? And I can't just slide this window out like I did this one, because there's a piece of weather stripping on here. But that weather stripping stops about right here, so I'm pulling it past that point so I can lift it out of there. But you see that weather stripping in there? You see this? That's what's keeping this thing from coming out. And so if you have weather stripping and you're trying to get your windows out, one, it's good because your windows have good weather stripping, but it makes it hard to get them out as easily. So now I'm going to clean out this thing and put a new piece of glass in here, okay? So let's say you've broken a piece of glass. Show you how to cut a piece of glass and then get this, and there's a slot in there where that piece of glass went that's no longer in there. And I'm just gonna pry these out. And so one of the things you're seeing is how hard this putty, that glazing putty gets. When it gets that hard, it can be, it's one reason why I'm telling you that, because of glass is so hard to break, or so easy to break sometimes, it's sometimes not worth it to try to clean every piece of glazing out, because sometimes this glazing can be like concrete. And so instead of chasing the whole window around, like I can't get that to break right there. And that's some hard glazing, right? And so instead of chasing that around, if I had a piece of glass in there, I would just leave that. I would take out the glazing putty that is loose, and then I would just only reglaze those areas. Does that make sense? So all I'm doing now is I'm just going to clean this track out, this 1/4-inch little groove track. Now what I have in here, and what you'll have in here is, see this little diamond? It's very little. Okay, that's called a glazing point, okay? And basically what happens is there's a gun that you put down on top of your glass, and it shoots these glazing points in here. And I've got them all around. There's another one right there. And I've got to get those out of here because for the glass to sit down smoothly. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, it has 8 glazing points in this window. And so I got to get those out of there. No, I'll tell you why. No. I mean, my word, that's hard. Okay, this would be a place where you would use a heat gun. Okay, so I haven't really advocated for heat guns, but I haven't faced glazing that hard. But this would be a place where a heat gun would be perfect, and it would loosen this glazing right up. Alice, do you want to grab that heat gun?
Who was it in the Fort Worth area that you recommended for strip and the dipping strip?
For what?
Did you recommend someone?
For the dipping? We use a place in Forney.
It's called Jot 'em Down.
Thanks.
I don't know where I am.
Is it in your packet?
It should be in your packet.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you can see this is a Wagner heat gun. They have all kinds of different nozzles and stuff you can put on here that would go on here that would allow you to kind of point and shoot. But I'm going to have to heat this area up. Do we have an extension cord? Because I can't get this glazing out of here.
Why would you typically use a heat gun?
Because you don't need to. Like all that other glazing came out really easy, and I'm just got this one little spot here I can't get out. But I know it's a tool that some people use quite a bit. We just don't need to. And so,
But you're not worried about it damaging it.
no, and it's slow too. You'll see that I'll sit here and I'll go like this, and for 3 or 4 minutes just waiting for it to loosen up. And so I just also don't like heating up the chemicals. And so there's a piece of it that I don't like it from that perspective. But I just can't freaking get that thing loose.
What's your opinion on like the paint strippers? Not taking the whole, get all the way out.
What's my deal on what?
Like a brush on stripper?
Oh, I think they're great. I think they're great, and we use them quite a bit. You know, in our commercial application, we are typically, I might have gotten it. We hire out what we do is when we go to a job, we'll go in and take out the sash, and then we actually have a second company come in and they do all the chemical treating on the frame. So they'll come in and all of this paint, outside and inside, primer or brick mold and everything, they strip the whole thing down with chemical strippers, right? And the chemical strippers that have come out are no longer, or there are some that are toxic, but some of them just are actually pretty good without being toxic. Thank you. And so so you can, I mean, it's like a hair dryer. And so
How is it different than
well, I don't know if this one's actually going to go up to 800 degrees, so it's a little bit more than a hair dryer. But I'm just going to put this on here for a few minutes. It's going to loosen this up. That's all right. I'm just kind of curious how long it's going to take to loosen it up. Yeah, so that wasn't too bad, right? So that loosened it up enough for me to get in there and take that off. How much are these? But you can see that loosened it up, and it just basically made it kind of more like a soft bread, right? And it was just something, oh, that's cool. It's cooling off now. And so now I've got my thing cleaned and everything, right? So I need a tape. Do you have a tape measure?
Yeah, I'm gonna put this in the other end. Are you done with this?
I am, thank you. Thank you. So I've got a piece of glass. It's about, I don't know, 9 3/4 by 11 3/4. So what we're going to do is we're now going to cut a piece of glass. And this is something I think you guys can do. It's not necessarily very hard. It's just something you need to be careful with. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make a little area here. And the cardboard is here because it's a great way to cut glass and kind of be careful. But what I'm doing is I'm going to make on here my dimensions. So I'm going to draw a line at 9 3/4. Let's see how big that is. And then I'm going to make another line that's 11 3/4. Because I don't want to draw on the glass, okay? So if that was 9 3/4 from there. Then I'm going to go 11 3/4. Do the same thing. And this keeps your, from one, if you got to cut multiple pieces, you now have a board that you can cut everything out on, right? I can lay my glass on here, and I've got my lines underneath, and I'm going to take my glass cutter, and I'm going to cut right down that line and right down this line without ever touching the glass or ever drawing on the glass. So now you just need a piece of glass. Perfect. Thank you. Yep. So we're just looking at our scrap pile, right? And so we're going to look at what we've got. Let me see if we get lucky. Nope, that's too thin. So that one won't work. So now I've got my glass here, and because I've laid out those lines on there, right, I can now just let my glass sit on top of here and I can make my cuts. So the first cut I'm going to make is, I'll do it this way, it'll be 9 3/4. Actually, I'll make this 11. Okay. So now you can get these glass cutters in any hardware store, but I'm now going to I'm pressing down and I'm just going to draw all the way across this piece of glass, okay? So, and I'm pressing down pretty firm, and you can hear it cutting. I don't know if you can hear it cutting. Okay, and the reason it's on cardboard is because you can press down and you can break it. The other thing you can do is just go to the edge of a table and go like that and pop it. And so that was my 11 3/4. Now I'll do my 9 3/4. Make sure I did that right. And I'll again go to my side of the table, just pop it. Now you can also, this little ball right here is weighted, so if you have something you can actually hit along that line and you'll actually see that glass break a little bit. I didn't do that in this case. But if you have a stubborn piece of glass that does that, you can do that. And then we're going to test it, make sure it fits in there. Fit in that way. It's get a little tight there. So, and now I've got to clean up these edges because I've got these glazing points and everything else. I'm a little bit tight by maybe, so it's going to be a little bit of a tight fit. Now, the reason I don't use glazing points anymore is because of silicone. What I do, thanks Alice. It's like you know what I'm going to do. Essentially what we're doing now is we're taking a small bead of silicone and I'm going to run it around the edge of this thing here, right? And then I will take my glass and I'll seat it down in there and then I'll let it dry. The glazing points were always to keep the glass from shaking loose or coming loose later. The glazing is, as you'll see when we use it, is a ancient 100-year-old glazing solution with whiting and linseed oil that takes a long time to dry. And so we've actually, you learn this from experience, but you actually have gone to jobs, and in the truck it's doing like this as you're traveling down the road, and it actually breaks that glazing loose. So we actually have to wait for that glazing to dry. And the glazing sometimes will take 3 weeks, a month, maybe 2 months to dry, depending on the weather and everything else. It just takes a long time for it to dry out. And so, but using the silicone is a way that we've learned to keep from having to do glazing points. The other thing you'll see at the hardware store is they sell glazing points. Okay, and I don't recommend getting them, but they are basically they're a big metal thing that you push down in your glass, and you push them in with a putty knife. The problem is that they're so clunky and big that sometimes they can be they can get in your way, and you can actually, when you're doing the glazing later, you'll see it'll get in the way. And what I'm doing, I'm just making sure it's going to fit. I'm going to dry fit it first, and then I'll pull it back out. Okay, that will fit there. So I did the width pretty good, but I got a little bit sloppy on the length, and so I'm a little bit off here. But we'll get it in there. And then, so I'll take my, I don't know if, did you just cut this, Alice? Or is this in the box? The other thing with glazing is sometimes, or with silicone, if you leave that in there too long, you got to pop the seal back on it. Yeah, see, this is the one we used before. You got a new one?
You have to cut it.
Yeah. So we had used that one on our last show, so we're going to have to cut it again. And I'm going to cut this with a really small point here. Maybe with an 1/8 inch hole right there. Because what I want is, let me see, I don't have to pop this. So what I want is, if I'm not going to put a lot in here. It's just going to be a very small little bead. But it's not going to be a sloppy bead. Here it comes. It's just enough to lock this glazing, this glass into this. And I don't want it to come out. I don't want it to cause a problem for our painter later, because silicone doesn't take paint. So we just got to be really careful with it. So it's a very small bead on there. Let me see if I can get this in here. A little bit loose there. Being held out by that. You know what, I'm probably going to have to cut another one. I'm like an 1/8 inch or 1/16 of an inch too big there. Let's see if it'll fit in there. It'll fit in that one though. And that's kind of typical, because the way you have to cut that glazing is it's sometimes hard to get it to be down to the 1/16 of an inch. So I'm going to loosen this up. one's not gonna work. I'm just gonna have to make this one work on this new one. Sorry, guys. Hopefully all these things I'm doing don't make you discouraged, because it's not.
It's helpful if how realistic it actually is.
Exactly.
That absolutely happened to me.
Yeah, this is a hard one. I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes you'll have glass that just the glazing will just fall out, and then other times it'll be hard as concrete like this. And I'm just taking the point of my 5-way and just pushing into that side is really hard, because I'm finding that when I get behind it, I can break it loose. But this is where I would say that this is like the concrete that you don't want to have to mess with. Okay. And this is, just so you know, this is probably the hardest part, is getting your sash prepped. Okay, so I'm going to put getting all the glazing points out of there, getting all those diamonds out of there so it doesn't stop my glass from coming in. I'm going to re-silicone my edge. Just trying to put enough on there to seat it. So that'll just seat, and I would probably leave that for an hour or so just to let it tighten up. Then I don't have to do glazing points. Now we get to glaze the window. So you can use all kinds of things. There's what's called DAP 33, which is what this is. And again, this is available at most hardware stores. A lot of professionals in the WPA will swear on Sarco. It's another kind of glazing putty that you can use. I think there's debate in our office, and I know there's debate online with those guys about which one's better. Sarco, DAP sometimes will say that it dries too slow, and that's true. But I also know that from experience it lasts a long time, and so I like the technique, the reliability of it, and so. What I'm doing now, and the reason I'm taking the whole thing out, is sometimes when they've sat in a lumber yard for a year, the bottom of these things can be, all the oil could have fallen into the bottom, and it'll be all chunky and hard. And so I'm actually taking it all out, and I'm going to knead it like this. And I can already tell that this oil is pretty well mixed through there, but sometimes you'll take it out and it'll be really crusty. So you gotta knead it like this. Now I won't need that much for this window. So after I knead it, I'm gonna put most of it back in here. And if it's cold, you'll wanna warm it up with your hands. And there's a number of different kind of putty knives you can use on this. I've seen guys use very bendy putty knives. These are very stiff. I like a stiff putty knife. Now this is actually called a glazing knife that you'll see at the lumber yards, and I like these. I think they're good. But to do these fast and to get them done, it just takes a little bit of practice, but it's not hard. Now all I'm doing is I'm just going to press I'm just grabbing it as quick as I can, and I'm just going to try to push it in here, okay? All the way around. Right? So I'll do that over here. I'm going to be messy, doesn't matter. You'll see that in a sec. Okay. That's roughly in there, right? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my putty knife, and you essentially have, if we look at the window sash, right? If we look at it really blown up, right? Here's your profile here. The glass is sitting right there. What you're wanting to do is you're wanting to draw a line as clean as you can from this point right here, okay, that comes up through here, out to there. And to do that, I'm going to tip my knife, okay, into that point right there. I'm just going to shove it in there, and then I'm just going to draw that knife across here. Okay? Yeah, exactly. Now, what's happened here is if you look on the back side of this thing, I'm out too far. See that glazing line in there? See that? So I have my glazing lines out too far. So I'm going to have to tip my knife in much tighter. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to be much tighter this time. I'm going to come across here again. Right? And just draw it up in the corner. Now you can see.
Is the knife on the glass or is it on the wood?
Knife is on the glass and on the wood. So I'm pushing down pretty hard on the glass, and I'm drawing, and I'm pushing it up against here, and I'm drawing it across here. And you'll see, I think you'll see, that you can't really see it through that glass anymore, right? Now that glazing line is much tighter, okay? And basically you're just going to do that all the way around this window, okay?
Are you worried about scratching the glass?
No. And so I can, fairly quick here. Now I ran out there, so I'll shove some more in there. But fairly quickly, right, I can, glaze this window out. And if I get a few little rough spots like that, and I can come back and clean it up later. But if I have little rough spots, I can run my finger along here like this and smooth it up. I can come back pretty easily and run that line across there, right? And I'm going to want to let it dry. And I kind of got a little speedy there. But, fairly quickly you can glaze these things. Once you get that pressure and that point right, you can just draw it along there. Now, this is ideal conditions because this is really soft. When I did the video on Build Show doing this, it was a cold day. It was like 45 degrees. And so drawing this along there, this was like rock hard. So it was really hard to do. But then I just pick up all these loose pieces, right? And I have a little bit of cleanup to do there. And in the corners, I just kind of pull up on the corners, and it makes a nice tight corner. Oh, it's not very good, right? In these corners, just do that. You're just drawing it up, and you glaze the window.
Is the glazing supposed to be painted over?
Yeah, so because it dries so slow, you're really going to want to wait a few weeks before you dry it. Now, if in the summertime, you could leave it a few days and be ready to paint. But what happens if you paint it too soon, it's going to bubble, the paint's actually going to lift up off of that surface and not work. So now now we take our sash and we put it back in, and all we're doing on this one is we put our parting stop back in, we slide the glass in, we put our interior stop, and our sash is back in there, right? If you've got, we're going to let you guys glaze if you want to try glazing, and if you want to try cutting some glass, you can do that. But I'm still here to answer questions. But those are the basic steps. Getting the sash out's really pretty. It was hard on this one. Sometimes it can be very easy. you saw this time, and kind of a little bit thankful because I don't want it, I fear sometimes it's so easy, they go home and try to do it and they're like, that guy made it look so easy. And it's sometimes it's just not easy. And so getting them back in, pulling them out, fixing a piece of glass, trying to think what other problems you would have. But, basically at this point, we've now, gotten the window working again. We've repaired broken glass. We've, as far as the weights and stuff go, if I'm putting this back in, I'm basically taking my sash cord, right? And what I'm doing is, I will, and I'll just do it, just show you real quick. So basically, let's pretend this sash is up in here. I'm just doing this to show you the lengths and stuff on these things. I'm going to tie a knot in the end of this. Okay, and I might do a double knot right there, just so that I've got a bigger, fatter knot there. Okay. I'm going to cut it. Hey, Chris, I think there's some sash weights right around the corner, right there. I'm going to push this into that hole, right? I am going to nail it back in there, okay? I'm going to push it in that hole, and I'm going to take a small nail, and I'm going to drive that nail right there, okay? Because I've put sash in there without putting that nail in there, and that thing comes loose, and a loop goes back down into the hole, and you got to open things up again. It's kind of a real pain. So I've got this. It goes back through the pulley, right? And what you're going to be doing is, so I've cut it again. We're going to go back through that pulley. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to an upper sash is going to be a longer weight, because what's happening is this gets pulled down, it gets lifted up, right? So I'm going to find that ideal, and sometimes you can take these old weights and the old ropes and get the exact length, and I'm actually going to tie this loop, and I'm going to, just like on our sample window, this hole that's in the sash right here, I'm just going to tie a knot right here, tie it right to that, tie it right in that hole. Sash weight's the same thing, or with chain rope, it's the same thing. I'm just going to tie a knot in this thing, and it's a double knot in that weight that holds it in the wall. And then you put your weight back over, and you're done. So it's really just simple knots that you're tying these things together. You want to get the right weight, because what you don't want to do is, especially on that lower sash, lift it up, and your rope's too long, and your weight ends up bottoming out. Okay, so you have to be careful about the length of this rope, but basically you've got, that's it, right? Now it's back in, you put your trim back on, and your windows are working. At that point, you're painting, and when you paint, you got to make sure that you paint it, and then you'll move it down into a open position. And every hour or two, you'll go back and you'll move that sash. And you got to wait sometimes, a few days for that paint to really cure on the outside. And then you're going back once it has cured, and you are waxing your tracks, okay? And that will make these things move very easily. You go get car wax, Carnauba car wax at the auto parts store, and you get a rag, and you wax your tracks.
If you find the weather strippings damaged or need to be replaced, where do you get that?
Well, so this weather stripping, right, there's two types. And hang on one second, I'll show you the kind of wax we use. That's all right. What's that?
The weather stripping's on the table.
Okay. There's a number of different types of weather stripping, and I'll just show you real quick with this wax, kind of how dramatic this can be. But I just got Mother's California Gold, okay? And so this is just a paste wax that you're using, and I'll just take a rag like this, and I'll just get that rag kind of greased up, right? all the way around. And I'll just show you on this thing, which is kind of, if you've kind of moved it before, you know it's kind of rough. I'm just going to wax this real quick. I'll wax this weather stripping. I may have to do the same to the top. I'm going to do a little bit to the track edge right here. Already, there's no longer that stiff point right there. I can put a little bit of wax here. It comes up in there on both sides. I'm just waxing the track if it's in there, and it's still a little tight. I'd probably have to put a little bit more on there, but it's certainly moving easier than it was. And when your windows are fully painted, it just makes a big difference. What did someone ask me? Oh, thank you. So there's a number of different types, okay? And you can see all these different types here. I think the best one, and the historic one, is this kind of grooved weather stripping, okay? It's a T-style weather stripping. That's the one on this side right here. It requires you to cut a groove in the edge of your sash. They already cut that groove in this sash. They already have that T groove. If your windows don't have it, like this one, right, didn't have weather stripping, all I'm doing is I am cutting a groove, like with a table saw or with a skill saw, right down here about 1/4 of an inch deep. And then this will sit right there in that groove, and it'll slide up and down. The reason I like that T weather stripping is because as weather blows through here, there's really a strong stop for air infiltration there. The other type of weather stripping is this sprung bronze, okay? And basically it just works through compression, right? And so if you don't get that compression right, they don't work as well, but also I've just seen wind come through here much easier. And so I think for wind and air and water infiltration, this T groove is better than the compression. You can see that this is a compression. There's different types of compression weather stripping. There's also different widths of this T type, so that some are for very thin grooves or very thin tracks or wider tracks. The other thing you're doing is you aren't putting that weather stripping very high, okay? Just enough that what you want to make sure is that when it opens up, it doesn't run off that track. So sometimes you're kicking it up a little bit higher, but that's the only kind of consideration you need to make when you're using this T weather stripping, but that's the best kind. Now, if you've taken your window, like this one, cleaned it, if you put weather stripping on it and then get it working again, it can be a very efficient window that will test and grade very, very highly. So, you know, it is labor intensive. It is, you know, it's not high skill work, right? It's just labor intensive. And so unfortunately, you know, it costs us, you know, what we have to charge in order to do this is probably more than I'd like to charge, but it's just labor intensive. That's why the great thing, the reason we do these workshops is because you guys can do this, right? It's not hard, and you can have great working, efficient windows without spending a lot of money, and just, you know, have a few weekend projects where you're fixing windows.
So you could do one window in a weekend?
Well, I would think that when you get faster, you could do 2 or 3. If you don't have to replace broken glass and you're just getting windows working again, I mean, you can do 4 or 5, right? If you're just waxing, breaking paint seals, waxing, getting them working again, that's a very quick project. If you're actually having to reglaze windows, right, you can go to your windows and see this glazing right here? It's coming loose. You can just go to your window and just say, I'm just going to clean up those areas where there's loose glazing, and I'm just going to go put back fresh glazing in. And that too can be a very short, you know, project weekend where you're just going in and cleaning that kind of stuff up. Because in general, most of this glazing is actually in pretty good shape. Just there's a few spots like that. So you could go to your window and go, you know what? I've got some areas I need some glazing. I need to get them operable again. I want to do some weather stripping. Those are short projects. But the one window a weekend would be if you're completely stripping, completely opening it up, completely changing it, in my opinion.
So is that rope has a name, what did you?
It's a cotton sash rope.
And it's all the same?
Yeah, and you'll go to Ace Hardware and you'll say, I need sash cord, and they'll take you, and there's bins of sash cord. So,
It's all the same, basically, if it's common.
correct.
And it's all written very, like, it's all.
It's on the package, yeah.
In your package, it's spelled out pretty well.
Yeah, we've got a resource list in that deal that you can have that.
Okay,
We
so
also offer free window consultations, so if you're not sure what's going on with your window, schedule a time with me and I can come out and say what areas and how we
well,
will.
our problem is our houses and all of the text.
Well, if you send us photos as well, Brent and I can take a look and help address.
What were you saying?
issues.
So this, the
What?
glazing,
Yeah.
is that compatible with an oil paint?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a linseed oil based. That's why it takes so long to dry, is because it's linseed oil. The kind of caulking that comes in a tube you don't want, because it's actually latex based and it doesn't work as well. You need the oil based.
What's your opinion on oil-based versus water-based for exterior paint?
Well, it's changed a lot. My recommendation for any exterior paint is high gloss, okay? Because that's going to create that skin. That's not going to break down to the UV. And so at a minimum, it's semi-gloss. Best is high gloss. Now, you think of high gloss, you're like, well, it's kind of shiny and everything. That shininess wears off in a month. And so it just doesn't stay that way. But it creates that skin that you want that's going to make them last longer.
Do you normally let that silicone dry before you put the glaze on it?
What you're doing is you're setting the silicone. Yeah, you're setting it, and that's why I said you let it dry for an hour, typically, is you're letting it skin up and cling to the glass so that you can go back, and doing that glazing isn't going to mess up that seal. But yes, you're waiting for it to dry, but it dries pretty fast. So we've got some sash out here. If you want to practice glazing, right? We'll take this glazing out. You can reglaze this window. That sometimes can be a mystery, but it's really not. And so I'll just literally peel this glazing right out of here, and then someone can come back and just reglaze this window. And
You just worked so hard on that.
yeah, I mean, so that's, you know, that can be kind of a mystery, scary point, but it's not, and you'll get the hang of it pretty quick. And so, you know, unless there's other questions, you know, we're around to answer and things like that, but you're welcome to try reglazing some of these windows if you'd like.
I still don't understand the rope.
You don't understand it? How? You know, what don't you understand?
Get it back in.
How you get the rope back in there?
You were over there. We were
Oh, I'm sorry.
there, so we didn't get to see how you started.
Yeah, so basically, you know, let's just say the sash is back in there like this. You are going to,
Over here and see the hole where you put the knot in.
I appreciate you doing all this.
you're welcome. So there's that hole, and I've taken my cotton sash rope and made a knot.
Yes.
And so I'm pushing it into that hole. And I would take a nail and I would nail that right into that hole.
Okay. Do you
And-
see this, Joe? No, you don't.
And then this goes right in. There's a slot, Brett, that's already in your sash. That's where that rope goes. And then you're taking the end of the rope and pushing it through that pulley, right? And then it just, you know, that sash will sit right back in there like that. And then this pulls it up and down.
That hole, you put it up in my line, put it in there with the nail.
Yeah, so a lot of our guys are.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming.
And so where does this now go?
This, well, this one already has weather stripping, right? So I don't need that. But on this one, I would nail this right here. It goes right in that track. That track right there, it's going to go right inside that track.
Okay, I found at least one coat while it's out.
our windows are gonna be in about this same shape, I'm afraid.
Can you say that again?
I think our windows are gonna end up being in the very same shape as this one is.
Okay.
Because these aren't the ones you
Too heavy.
This would be commercial.
Yeah.
That's serious.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, you can see the size of the sash that are on that window. Yeah, it's small.
I couldn't find little ones.
You couldn't.
I could barely find that.
I think I just had the big ones.
I found that. That's a unique one.
Yeah, that's very unique.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
If your windows, if you feel free to take pictures.
Oh yeah, what was that first thing I did find it on the pattern? The one that does the
The dipping, what's the name of the dipping?
Jot them down. He's in
Jot them
Forney.
down, like write it down?
Yeah.
Jot them down. We need to add, here, I'm gonna go type.
This window, the weather stripping had already been added.
Correct.
Do you think it was built that way? or-
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you look at the patents for that weather stripping, they date back to the 1890s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they're pretty, totally historic. The reason we like that is because it is an historic solution.
Got it.
And there's good precedent for it, so.
Okay. I live in Mistletoe Heights.
Oh, you do?
Yeah,
Okay.
Lots of old windows.
Well, like Alice said, if you want to send us pictures, we're happy to consult. Just say, well, this is what you got to do. Yeah. So, and we'll build new sash for you too. If they're in generally pretty good shape, you just need 1 or 2 sash, we'll build those for you too.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thanks for posting.
So, and I don't know all the
Yeah.
different names for the parks. Okay, so the upper window, the glass is sliding down because that.
Yeah, the check rail is rotten or bad. Yeah. How big are your windows? Are they big or are they small?
They're one.
Okay.
One.
So that's a pretty common problem when you got a 1/1 big Craftsman or Victorian that check rail warps or goes bad after time.
Yeah, because we can see where it's dropped the.
Okay, so this joint is broken. Yeah, okay. Okay, so it's a Victorian house. Yeah. So what's happened is your joinery, this is the check rail, right? This joinery has opened up, okay? And so sometimes there's a nail that goes in here, sometimes there's a peg, but if this joint is going bad, you need to tighten it back up.
You don't need to hold my phone.
Yeah.
I can take it.
So that requires, what you're looking at is if this wood, okay, is not rotting, okay, if it's just dry, then you can open that joint back up, put glue in it, squeeze it back together, clamp it back together, and then just shoot a nail in it. Okay, and that locks that wood back together. Maybe even a couple nails, and it locks it together. And that's really should be all you do. If it's rotting, okay, and you got a porch, I doubt it's rotting. I bet the joint has just come loose.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but we've got one on the upstairs bedroom.
Okay.
That's
one
doing it too. But
Okay.
over here.
The one under the porch, I was poking at it, and it's still very hard and very fine.
Okay, good. That's good.
So.
Yeah, so your joinery, you just need to address the joinery.